Yo, what's good? And welcome to Max Spoilers Horizon Burning Shores edition. I'm Janet, that's JeffM. And remember, remember this is our spoiler cast and our spoiler cast series that we do here. And remember, you can unlock the podcast version of this, Every Deepest Dive, so much more by heading over to patreon.com/minmax with 2 N's. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Well, I guess my first question for you, JeffM, is overall, what'd you think of Burning Shores? I know you played Forbidden West fairly recently. I think I grabbed the platinum on it maybe a year or so ago, max, or like a few months ago, max. So where are you at with it? How'd you feel about it overall?
Well, I'm glad I can finally sit down with you to talk about this. We talked about Burning Shores a little bit on the last podcast, and Hanson was like, I'm just going to divide them so that, we don't have too much enjoyment talking about it.
And we're we're among our people.
That's right. People who actually care. The rest of the crazy people like us, because that's how I feel whenever I play these games. I just sit there and I think, this is so good, and I don't understand why the rest of the world refuses to acknowledge that. So I played, Forbidden West was kind of one of those shame games that I have plenty of, where I played a bunch when it came out, and then Elden Ring came out, and I just never went back to it. But my wife has become like our family's uber fan of Horizon. So she played through the first game in preparation for going into Forbidden West, and she just played through like the entire thing and then was super excited for Burning Shores, and so we ended up playing through that together. It became a thing where she was like, she was not going to wait for me to play through it myself. And now she's already started a new game plus, and she's playing through it again. She's unstoppable.
Oh man!
So it was fun jumping back into it, and kind of getting to see her play through the story stuff that I did at first, and kind of that refresher of what was so cool about it in the first place, and then going through the rest of the story and the DLC. So I have just become a bigger and bigger fan. Part of it is having a partner who is really into it and like really enjoys the story and everything, kind of seeing her excitement of it. But part of it is, I think it's just completely underappreciated in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I share a lot of your sentiments on that. And it's funny because I think the con of being stuck in, and it sounds very dramatic, stuck in an industry, but being in this situation where you are sort of the champion of this kind of underrated series is you don't always get to talk about the negatives either, because like you end up talking so much about like fighting for why it's good. Of course, I'm sure both of us can acknowledge the shortcomings or where we want to see spots of growth. So I'm excited to dig into that as well. But just off the bat, Burning Shores, I really enjoyed my time with it. It felt like kind of the perfect size. At first, I was a little worried it might be a little too short, because coming off of starting to play it, I remember hitting up Leslie and being like, how long is it? And he's like, you can finish it in like 4 hours if you mainline. I'm like, that's not too much. But the more I started playing it, the more I very much didn't mainline it anyway, because I just, enjoyed doing what I always do in this game, which is like, grinding for materials to do whatever upgrades I have listed in my jobs. And then too, there was that added incentive of, I don't know if I'm going to want to, follow in your West footsteps and do like a new game plus, or clean up all the icons on the map just for fun until the next game comes out kind of thing. So I'm like, this might be my last hurrah with this game. So let me take my time with it, because otherwise what am I upgrading for, right? Like, I don't want to do it all once I roll credits on the DLC. So I definitely spent my time going through it slowly, enjoying checking out a couple side quests here and there, and kind of just seeing what's there. That being said, I still didn't 100% the DLC, but I did play like a bit more than just the main line. And that, I feel like if I wanted to go all in on this DLC, I would have kind of a lot of content, because the size of the map is, fairly sizable in terms of all the different objectives they give you, not just in terms of having a couple side quests and like 5 main quests or so, but also just having a bunch of little stuff like the Pangea figures, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. Stuff like I'm forgetting the exact name for them, but the capture the point, but flying instead of just scanning.
The aerial captures.
Yeah. And stuff like that, I think really sort of extends what we have going on here. But jumping into the story of everything. So just as, setting it up, right? We start off, there's always a question of how do you begin this DLC? Do I got to go to a certain place? Really, you just, you buy the DLC, you boot up the game. It'll say, thank you for buying the DLC. We're going to kick things off. And then you get a call from Silence, which definitely, in the wake of Lance Reddick's passing had more weight to it than it normally would have. Because it definitely had this man, I don't know, talk about not knowing when. I always talk about how you don't know the last time you did something is, whether it's something as simple as playing a game or, a childhood thing that you just never did again for the rest of your life. And I very much felt that going to this DLC, and it was, expanded upon with Reddick's passing and that being a question of, will we see him in the next game? Was his stuff already recorded? He's such a big character in the game. Are they going to recast him? Are they going to try to, mash his VO together to make it work? Or are they going to have him pass in game there's so many questions and so much uncertainty and also so much challenge on how to do it in a way, obviously I'm sure everything would get cleared to his family, his estate, but what the future looks like for it. And all of that being said, it added so much more emotion to what is a simple, hey, here's the main quest of this game, right?
Yeah. It kind of changed my feeling towards the character as well, because I have always appreciated, him as an actor and his performance in the series, but he's always been, kind of antagonist. You can sometimes see where he's coming from, but this was just oh, Silence, he's calling me again. I just want to hear more. I want to talk more to him. And even there were a couple parts in the game where, Aloy is still pretty cold and standoffish to him because that's where she is, kind of in their story arc. And I was like, man, I kind of just want a really nice, heartwarming buddy moment with these two characters. So definitely all those questions hanging over of where did they go with him, but it's kind of a nice way to start and end the DLC with.
Yeah, funny enough, and this is, the beauty of the spoiler cast where we can go anywhere. I do want to talk briefly about the ending, because that is the main times that we interact with Silence, right? We get that call. He explains that there is another aspect to the Far Zenith threat. So, I forget offhand how many there were in the main game, but we had our squad of Zeniths that we fought and took down. That was kind of what the whole game leads up to in Forbidden West. And this was there's one other left, which is we could argue is a little convenient, but I thought it was fun. With the whole, how could that be possible? What's this guy's angle? He's sort of this billionaire celebrity, which I think is a very relatable thing. I had a lot of people draw the Elon vibe comparisons to Landra and, how he sort of carries himself and how he's this big presence. So we had that whole spiel. But then at the end, we do kind of get that heartfelt moment of still, again, having that antagonism between, more from Aloy's side. Because what's funny about Silence is, and that's why he's so lovably hateable as a character, because he's such a jerk. He's always being derisive, but he's kind of just doing his own thing. He's comfortable with who he is, and everyone else is why are you this way? And he's you too would be this way if you weren't ignorant to the means of the stars and the I don't know. It's in anyone else that might be just pretentious, but I think he carries it with such swagger that it kind of works. It's ooh, can I change him? I don't know.
Yeah, and there were times in the story where I was definitely on his side, because he has always been focused on I'm going to do whatever I need to in order to avoid the apocalypses, multiple plural that are coming. And every now and then Aloy's yeah, but why aren't you nicer to me? Why can't we be better friends? And he's I don't care. And I'm playing it thinking, I also don't care. Let's just focus on, the robots or whatever the next threat is. So he is a super fun character. Lance Reddick always did a great job in everything that he did. So I've always enjoyed that. And I do I do like Landra as kind of the main villain. It is always that tricky thing of like, well, we just wrapped everything up. We don't have a villain now, so now we need to introduce a new villain, make you hate this person, and then have an entire story arc. And I think Guerrilla just does a really good job of that. No matter, I said it on the podcast, but whether it's, a 60-hour, like main story arc or a, much smaller 4-hour arc like this, like they're good at giving you a full story, making you care about these new characters, making you care about, the new place that you're exploring and also the previous lore of that new area. I always enjoyed that, just like finding a new place and learning a bunch about it. And Landra is an easy kind of character to. My wife was just like, huffing the entire time of like, oh God, I hate this guy so much. And it's like,
I know.
But what's impressive is Guerrilla did that so fast, like they can hook you so easily. And like you instantly identify the things that you don't like about this character and also why they're a threat in there. Yeah. I thought they did a good job of that because that's another one of those, like, it can feel very artificial, but you quickly learn like, okay, the reason he wants to get off the planet makes sense because it ties directly into, the larger threat that they've set up for the next game. But then you learn that it's going to like blast radiation across everything else. And so it's like, okay, like this feels like a very organic, sensible reason that we now have to intervene and that we should care about this. And it does kind of feel, like for a series where everything is always going to destroy the entire world and all of civilization, like it feels completely in line and it doesn't feel like a completely, tacked on thing.
Yeah, it definitely has that challenge of, like you mentioned, being relevant enough that you buy into it, but not so relevant that you also need to play it. Because not only are you working against not everyone finishes, most people don't finish like the games that they play, but also most people definitely don't finish DLC. Like that's such a small amount of your player base that's even, checking this out. So you definitely want to navigate,
and especially if they're playing
aspects.
On PS4,
Oh yeah, then, which is like kind of a weird thing here. Well, one, I want to bring in, and there's so many things I want to bring in. Well, let me first wrap up the silence aspect of it in terms of, talking about Lance and all that. Give a quick shout out to Walter. We'll come back to Walter Landra because actually, I'll just save the Walter Landra thing for later because I have so much to say about Walter Landra, but I want to pull in a comment from Kenda, who wrote in and said, it was a real bittersweet moment at the end, and this was really what I want to get at, when Silence finally thanked Aloy for her, quote, extraordinary contributions. It seems they were setting him up to be more of an ally in the third game. Hope they can manage to give him the end he deserves instead of an off-screen death. Yeah, definitely. It's like, it's interesting because it's a tough thing too where, and there's no right answer to this, right? But it's like, well, I don't necessarily want it to be, off screen and field canned. I also don't want like something really graphic, either, right? Yeah. Like I think we've seen, especially with Death in Horizon has been really interesting because, we had, oh gosh, why am I blanking on his name? Like the only guy that died in the main game, Forbidden West. Varl. Thank you, Rich.
Yes.
Appreciate it in the Twitch chat. Varl was really the only death we really had of allies, which I still feel like did not need to be there, or could have easily just been Errant. Let's be real, right? Like we could, and I get we want it to be a good character, and then you'd feel the pain, and I'm like, there's lots of, I think, sociological layers to why Varl's death, I feel like could not have happened, and that would have been fine. But that being said, death has been tricky in Horizon. We really only had that death, which was kind of controversial, and then the original of Aloy's father figure and things. So I'm not sure what it looks like, especially because they are kind of taking that more allyship angle with him. So it would make sense for he just left. But again, questions for future stuff. I do want to highlight though, yes, that extraordinary contributions line felt like, I don't know. Again, it had so much more weight to it in the context of Reddick in real life. And, there's been so much conversation around the contributions he's made, not just to Horizon, but to gaming as a whole. So it felt like almost like I'm telling you, but like we're telling it was this really nice, sad, lovely moment to end on with Aloy kind of smirking to herself. And, I just thought there was something really beautiful in that.
Yeah,
so I want to shout that out.
They had her reaction be kind of as much as they could for that character. You know, like she's not going to turn around and give him a big hug or anything. But just kind of acknowledging it, I think, as much as you could in that moment was really nice to see.
Yeah. Jumping to the PS4 aspect of it, Rich wrote in and said, was there anything that felt like it couldn't run on PS4? It looked great, but I didn't see anything that seemed to merit the chains unless it's all marketing. So, one, what are your thoughts on it being PS5 exclusive from the did it need to be perspective? And then what are your thoughts on it being exclusive when the base game wasn't? Did you find that odd? I'm not sure historically how common that is because I don't often even dip into DLC.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that on the podcast too, but I said at the time, like, there's nothing that stood out to me as being like so heads and shoulders above what the base game did, but that's more of a testament to just it has always looked so amazing. I don't know how they pulled it off to begin with, and so I don't think it was a marketing thing. I certainly don't think it was a marketing thing or anything like that. I'm sure they had their reasons for why it wouldn't run on PS4 or you know, maybe it's a matter of like how can we get this out of the door if we're focusing on two different platforms or whatever.
Yeah.
I trust that they have their reasons for it, and they certainly have their standards for everything that they put out. But the game, you know, these games have always looked so good that I'm mystified how they run as well as they do, and they look as good as they do on any platform. That if they tell me that they can't make it happen on PS4, I'm like, okay, yep, I totally understand and believe you on that.
Yeah, for me, I feel like, well, two things. I want to bring in Aaron from the community who also talks about this, mentioning flying through the clouds has got to be one of the best things in a game ever. The game already looked good, but they really pushed it with the DLC. Excited to see the future for the Decima engine as well as the Horizon story. And yeah, to your point, Jeff, they've always been killing it with the overall fidelity and I think the performance of their games. Mm-hmm. But I do think probably it's more, besides the fact that it does look really good, and I guess it's not shocking to me from glancing at it that it wouldn't be on PS4, but to me it's more of a testament to how good they've made their PS4 version look, because I feel like it is one of the most competitive PS4 versus PS5 products at a glance. You know, again, if you're really in the weeds and you really know stuff, you know, people over at Digital Foundry, I'm sure, have a million comments and blueprints and things, but for a regular player like myself who isn't as attuned to that, I thought the game looked amazing on PS4. And I would guess that probably it's just on PS5 because, one, again, it's DLC. Most people aren't going to play it anyway. And two, I'm guessing, you know, we do know that they're continuing the franchise. It's been made very clear. It's been hinted at with like recent changes behind the scenes that they are still working on this franchise. So it probably just makes sense to, hey, we're already in developing for PS5, because I'm pretty sure the next one won't be on PS4. Like, I'd be a little surprised if it wasn't. And the perk of also having it on PS5 is you do sort of start to wean the audience into the idea of, hey, Horizon's a PS5 franchise now, as most franchises are going towards, you know, as we just get further in the gen, and you start seeing that on the Xbox side too. So I think it's kind of, they did a little bit more because they could, and not because they could they have scaled this back to make it run on PS4? I'm sure it still would have looked gorgeous. But I think they're like, why be encumbered by that when we don't need to be? To bring it back into the laundry direction, I want to bring in a quote from Starkiller, who writes in and says, I want to shout out my boy Sam Witwer, aka Starkiller from Force Unleashed, as Walter Landra. Dude knows how to play a scumbag you love to hate. The thing I really loved about Landra as a character is how much you got, and it's over the top, right? Because it's sci-fi. So obviously you're going to have like mystical, wild elements that you don't have in real life. But I like what I felt the reality angle of Landra is in the brainwashing storyline. Like that moment in the game where you get to figuring out like, okay, well, maybe he's just like really charismatic and he's been scamming people for, centuries. So I don't know, the Quen fell for it. They were looking for it or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then you realize, no, they didn't just fall for it. Like that was part of it, but they also have been getting brainwashed into being his followers, into idolizing him. And he's going to take his favorite brainwashed people, take them off the planet and create a colony of just people that are brainwashed into loving him. And the reason that hits so hard, without naming names, without dragging people specifically, is I feel like I've seen so many instances of people in power, both from a, clout and business perspective and a financial perspective, cry about, I don't know, this idea of like what their interpersonal relationships are, of like, oh, you're, mad that now we can be included, right? Like now we won't get pushed out by the cool kids. And I'm like, you have some stuff to unpack by these comments, you spend a lot of time on Troy.com. I think you know what I'm thinking of. And seeing that in Landra, like but in an extreme version. And I'm like, yeah, no amount of money can get people to like you. Like if you suck, you suck. That just is what it is. And he's like, but it does, in this case, it does, and I can figure out a way to do it. And it sort of, both adds to his evil, creates an extreme version of reality. And I think also helps, gain respect for the Quen, because I think so much of the conversation around them, and Silence touches on this, is like, oh, they're dumb. They don't know what's going on. Like, look, they fell for this thing. And while you would hope that in general, people have more compassion for people in, both fiction and reality that fall for messed up stuff, because we've seen how it can happen. I think the brainwashing element adds an extra layer that helps take the heat and the responsibility even further off of them, which makes them a bit more, I don't want to say likable, because that sounds kind of mean, but basically like you kind of buy into what's going on with them and understand it a bit more.
Yeah. So I love the Zenith in general as kind of villains, because they definitely do tap into a lot of classic and interesting, sci-fi dystopian, like this is the future of, the, richest, most kind of capitalistic people. And we're just going to take that and we're going to blow it out in a bunch of different ways. Landra was an interesting one because it also kind of like pulls in a bunch of the Hollywood, like actor icon kind of idol stuff. But then, the Quen have been really interesting too, because they kind of pull into the idea of like the bureaucracy angle with the Quen is always super interesting. But then also the ancestors are the people we idolize, and we've kind of turned them into these religious figures. So it kind of makes sense that, Landra would come in and they'd be susceptible to that to begin with. But I think they did do a good job with, having Seika's sister be in there. Like that instantly makes you kind of start to identify more with them and identify more with what Seika's going through and identify with her as a character. And just kind of, peel back some of those layers and kind of start to understand the Quen a little bit better, kind of, see you interact with a number of Quen in kind of the side quests too, of being like, yeah, I don't know what was, I kind of like got wrapped up in all of this and I wasn't, I regret what I was doing and please help get these other people out. And I feel like that's a very kind of topical message and one that we can identify with nowadays.
I do have a question, because you mentioning, sort of Landra, the Hollywood angle, and then also Seika's sister reminded me of this dark fact. What's your take on the way the Zeniths are, and not all of them, because we've only seen it, I guess, out of two now. There's Landra, and then there's, again, blanking on the names a little bit, the main, antagonist of the last game, of the main game, right?
Right.
They both are obsessed with, let me find someone who can replace the person I loved back in, I guess, our time, right? Is sort of, or what we conceive of as the modern era. Because we had that with, again, I can't remember her name, but she was obsessed with Aloy and was like, oh, you look just like your clone mom, and I'm going to take you into space. And in an eternity, you're going to fall in love with me at some point. You got no choice, And I'm like, wow, this is a lot to fully pack on when I'm time to fight this really powerful machine.
Yes.
But you had that there, and then you had it with Seika's sister, where you see her, performing. There's a scene you walk in on, and it's her in another woman practicing lines, and it turns out they're practicing lines that Landra's actress wife would perform from her movies, and then he's like, oh, you're you don't really look like her, but you have your own beauty. And it's ooh, what's up with that? Yeah. What's going on here?
Weird grooming stuff going on. like all of that. Rich says it's Tilda. Yeah, is the other character.
Yes, Tilda. Thank you so much. Rich is carrying these names. Like
that's right.
Rich just pulled it aside, tab out, write all the names of every character, get ready to copy and paste them as we need them. Thank you.
Yeah, that's like another one of the interesting offshoots of like the kind of sci-fi lore, and because there have been a lot of stories where it's like, okay, well, eventually science is just going to figure out death and we're just going to stop dying. And it's like, and we get to see it in this game in terms of like, yes, the Zenith were kind of the worst people to begin with, because it was really just like all of the billionaires and anyone who was elite enough to like get on this planet and just screw off, into the solar system and like find their own other planet to like completely screw up. But I think like a strain of that kind of, like of the psychology of it is, man, if you live that long, like at some point you just kind of become corrupted and you become obsessed with, like the older aspects of your life that you can never get back to. And then you just start like grooming whoever you can find and trying to get, like at that point, like everyone that they're interacting with, they're not treating as their own real human beings. It's just like they're the next line of puppets that they're going to fill in whatever, servants or whatever other partners that they want them to be. And it is a creepy angle, and it's like a fun villain angle to instantly identify against and want to stop them.
Yeah, like there's something that it has that extra ickiness without being like too traumatic to look at, because it's usually people get saved before anything bad happens, which has been, kind of nicely convenient, right? From I think consumption standpoint. There's something really satisfying too about like, I don't know, whacking a creep. And that's kind of what you get to do in the Ryser a lot of times. It's like, okay, no. And like, that's kind of during that scene too, and he's like all up on her sister. She's like, all right, we're going out now, and you kind of have like that little moment of catharsis there to get to fight off. That's like the second to last, I think, main mission that we have going on. Continuing with story, which direction do I want to go in first? I think let's start off with a write-in from Kath, and I want to couch this as the question kind of being, the underlying question being, did you buy into Seika and Aloy? And then from there, we can also just discuss Seika as her own character, right? Aside from Aloy, because obviously at the end of the DLC, there is this romantic angle to their relationship, and you can kind of choose how you approach. I don't know if your choice really changes like the cutscene that comes out. I picked like, sure, but I don't know what the other ones looked like. So Kath wrote in and said, I strongly support LGBTQIA plus representation in video games, and I want to clarify, I am not against queer Aloy. In fact, I am in favor of it. But here's my dilemma. Throughout the game, Aloy has consistently rejected any romantic relationships, particularly with Erend. Who could blame her? But okay, I'm jumping ahead. Okay. Because of this, I perceived her as being aromantic and possibly asexual, although this is more implied than directly stated. As someone on the asexual spectrum, I was thrilled to finally have a representation of strong, independent woman who wasn't burdened by the past trauma or the narrative of needing to find the right partner. But then the DLC's ending happened. Let me be clear. I absolutely love the DLC, and it propelled the game to the top of my favorites list. However, the final choice left me with conflicting emotions. I appreciate the LGBTQIA plus representation and the ability to make choices in the game, but I wonder if it was necessary. Couldn't Aloy have remained uninvolved in a romantic relationship and still formed meaningful bonds with other characters? It feels like the writer overlooked the idea that there are more ways to champion diversity beyond lesbian representation alone. Thank you for letting me vent. I want your opinions on this, of which I have many. One, I don't think this necessarily means that Aloy is a lesbian. I think she totally could be, bisexual or pansexual. I do think that there is that feeling of, I'm glad Aloy is coming out of her shell, but it did feel like, could this happen in additional ways? Not in lieu of, for me, like personally, I don't mind the romantic element being in there, but what I really want to see moving forward in the franchise is cool. We have this look into who she is through this kind of romantic, flirty lens. What are the other ways that we can build on giving her more personality and edge? Because Aloy is such like a blank slate style character. And to Kat's point, like I've heard from other people too, like speculating on, oh, maybe they're trying to make her like be asexual, be aromantic, and that's why that's part of the sort of way she navigates relationships. For me, well, always is a little dramatic, but I suspected that Aloy might be someone who's into women because deep cut. Again, I was in the weeds in these games. Horizon Zero Dawn, there's a side quest with the Asurum tribe where you're like, go in, I don't know, you're fixing some machine for them. And just the way she was talking with one of the female characters, like it just had a little bit of a flirty edge to it. And that you can argue that that's part of the bravado of being like a hero in a story where you're playing as humans. Like I think there's aspects to that and just how characters are written. But ever since that moment, I'm like, maybe. So I do think in that sense, I wasn't as surprised. And then as far as like, was it also well done? It's tough for me to even know like how organic the romantic angle of the relationship felt for me as a player, because unfortunately I did know about this like before I played because everyone was tweeting about it. So I went in knowing there was like romance. So then I kind of saw it through the lens of like, romance already, like, oh yeah, she wants her. But it's like, I don't know if I actually felt that through the writing as much, or if it was as powerfully done. But, what about you? Well, one, did you have spoilers going into this? Did you know about Seika and Aloy? And then two, how did you feel their dynamic played out and, how it fits into who for Aloy as a character? Yeah. Also negative shout to Aaron, because I wouldn't be with Aaron either. Aaron sucks.
Yeah. So I didn't know about it. And it's one of those things where it's also hard for me to say because I feel like at this point I am hyper aware of, what writers are trying to do in stories and in video games. And especially in a case like this where you kind of like, there's a lot resting kind of on the shoulders of, one or two throwaway lines of dialogue to herself after a mission, where it's like, I wonder, did I come off as nervous there or whatever? And it's like, okay, I see what you're doing. Like, I see what we're hinting at here. In terms of like all the, like whether Aloy's asexual or something, that's something that I really appreciated, in the first game, and kind of in this, it kind of carried it over into the second game, where it was a really interesting aspect of her character that, especially in the first game, there are a lot of male characters who, she's essentially saving all of them, and then they all kind of have the chutzpah to be like, hey, are you interested in maybe, hanging out a little? Like
the Sun King? I'm like, the Sun King wants her. That was very obviously written, but not in the way that you're describing where it's like, and then he said, da-da-da. Yeah, that felt very organic.
Yes, yeah. He was definitely a better example of it. I think Aaron was a worse example when they first kind of met, and then I think that did kind of turn into more of a friendship. Like he realized he was in the friend zone there, but like there were just a series of characters where it's like they are, obviously interested in her, and she is just kind of, she's rejecting them. She's doing it like politely. And you could also get a sense of like the kind of gender politics involved there, where it's like, she is being nice about it because she doesn't want to hurt their own fragile feelings, but she's still kind of like making it clear that she's not interested in that. So I can see how you could look at that and kind of and see her as being aromantic and asexual. But I think my interpretation of it and what made Seika feel different to me is that like when Seika came along, it felt like this was a character that, whether or not Aloy was immediately attracted to her, like Seika is a very capable character as her in her own right. And it felt like she would, like Aloy was finally meeting her match, like meeting someone who was as good, and as independent and as capable as she was. And like her, like, the missions that those two go on together felt much more like a partnership, and like, hey, like, I'm going to help you with this. You're going to help me with this, like it wasn't just Aloy swooping in for the nth time and saving the day. And so like that kind of led to like their budding relationship feeling more organic to me and it making more sense to me of like, okay, finally Aloy has met someone who is, you know, as capable as she is, and that made it feel more organic. I totally get that. Like, if you have been reading the character as a romantic, that would definitely be disappointing. And it is. I also did appreciate. I'm not huge on you know, like romantic side stories in characters, so I did always appreciate that. Like, yes, we are just focusing on the apocalypse that is coming, and this kind of rolls that back a little. But at the same time, like, I'm just kind of. I care about Aloy as a character enough, and I've kind of been wrapped up in all these characters. That's kind of just like, yeah, good for you. Like you finally found someone that you can, you know, have a little moment with. And so I appreciated where it went, but I totally get, you know, kind of being disappointed by that.
Yeah. I think specifically if you're from those communities and like wanting to see that and then feeling like, not that it's taken away from you, but that, oh, I don't have that. It's like, oh, you know, I obviously you can't cover everything all the time at once, but I do get that sense of disappointment if you were hoping to see that, you know, in this character and it didn't come to fruition. I do think as far as Aloy's romantic history, I did always get a sense that like there was kind of something with Varl, but not really. Like I kind of felt like she liked Varl, but not enough to pursue Varl. And then when they had like that scene where like they're in, is it Rich who's like carrying? Is it Rich or Starkiller who's carrying the names? But Varl's like partner, like the person Varl gets with, and they're like, you know, macking in the tent, and then they're like, he's like, oh, just relax in this tent for a while, and you see their shadows, and they're all like macking on each other. Zoe, thank you. And it's like, and I remember like screenshotting and like texting Blessing about that and being like, man. Aloy's like, hey Siri, play Marvin's Room. You know, it's like she's alone. Like, she's like, you know what? Like it felt very like playing Marvin's Room. Oh, oh no! I might have to turn that off. Hold on, give me a second. Vamp for a second.
This is the problem. This is the technology taking over. It starts with, you know, random songs kicking in.
I forgot that we have that. It's one of those like the little pods, which frankly, I've never been a fan of that pod because when I tried to use it, it never works for me. I put it in a bin in my closet. Isaiah, my boyfriend, brought it back from the dead, put it on his desk. He's like, I'll use the pod. And see, this is why.
And she's
this
been
is why I'm
the
not
whole time. Yep.
This is why I'm not pro pod. Chat says Drake is definitely one of the Zeniths. You know, there's a lot to unpack there, right? But that's kind of the vibe I got from Aloy. So I think they did write her generally with space to maneuver. And I think to your point of the idea of her being excited to find an equal and someone who could be a partner, I feel like the times she becomes most alive and most animated, which maybe says, maybe this is negative, that she can only connect with people that are like her. But it is Varl, because Varl's a very capable fighter. It is, you know, again, so bad with the names here. The guy from Vegas who like was all techie and he's kind of neurotic, you know, and he'd like make little, like he made the diving mask. Like I never got a romance sense from that relationship, but like she was excited to meet someone who was like doing that same technological stuff. Like, and granted, I do think that is probably, and those are the layers where I think Aloy does have some nice writing edge to it, where you get a sense of this is someone who grew up in isolation, who feels isolated, who then continues to isolate. And you sort of see that play out in different ways. To that point, I do think the quick DLC like growth, it's like, maybe that isn't as impactful as it could have been. But also, what do you think? I thought it was really funny too. And part of this is, I'm sure, like, well, I don't know, actually, because I'm not sure what their plans are for the rest of the franchise. But I thought it was hilarious that they have like this like nice little moment, and it's like, oh, like I have feelings for you, and and then they, you know, okay, whatever. And then she's like, man, listen, I'm like really busy right now, and I was like, she's a jerk. Like, did you find that like? I found that so funny. I have choice words that I can't use here because Ben said we can't swear, but you know, I was like, okay.
It was a quick wrap up, and it is that weird spot of like, well, okay, like we've done our best to like build this up, but now you're at the end of the DLC. You're gonna leave the burning shore. Like your shore leave is done, and you're gonna go off. And I think they tried to make it, like a little more reciprocal. Where Seika's like, yeah, I got stuff to do too, so.
Yeah, but like, you don't got that going on, girl. It's like, oh, you know what? I didn't want to be with you anyway. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't even interested, I'm interested if you're interested. Yeah, I was just joking. Forget I said the whole thing.
Yeah, it's a weird position, especially, again, because all of this is optional. Like, I don't know how. I would assume that character is going to show up in the third game, and there's going to be more to that relationship or whatever, but I don't know how they're going to handle it. It was very abrupt to go from like, we finally confessed our feelings, but hey man, we're busy, we got stuff to do, I will see you later. I just told you that this giant like orb of hatred is coming to destroy the entire world. You don't have to help with that right now. Maybe we'll talk about that. We'll get into that later. At least like they both have the focuses, the little focuses that That's
the other thing too. It's like, you can't hit my focus still. It's like, come on, Aloy. Like, no one's buying this. Like, oh, I've been out of town. Where? You have a focus. I can talk to you anywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, definitely at the end of whatever Horizon 3 has, I'm sure if you played the DLC, you'll get to call her in for like the end of the battle or something goofy like that. Because I do think, and I get that they're big battles, but one thing that is getting a little bit predictable is it always ends with like, and now we rally everyone that's been working. And it doesn't feel as, I think, grandiose when it keeps happening. And I get that you need to because it's like a big deal, it's like the whole Earth. But I don't know. That'll be an interesting thing to look at, which sort of brings me to something that Thwip wrote in with, who said, I'll ask the most basic question. What are you hoping for in Horizon 3? Personally, I hope Aloy heads to the Quen homeland to meet back up with Seika. It could also give them a chance to really change up the scenery depending on where it is. Also, I really hope you have the option to customize your bow ammo type. I felt the number of bows I had to juggle in Forbidden West got a little out of hand, and it would have been nice to just carry 2 to 3 bows and swap out different arrow types. But what about you, JeffM? What are you looking for in Horizon 3?
Man, that's a tough question because, it always feels like, well, are they just grounded where they are now because they have a headquarters? Like, what is going to make them move off of this spot that makes logical sense for them to be and go to some other place? I would be totally happy if they just, for whatever reason, pack up everybody in every civilization and just move to a completely different region. Like,
we'll take the base and we'll just move it this way.
Yeah. But otherwise, I guess I don't have a lot of specific requests. I've been so impressed with Guerrilla's storytelling and the threads that they've decided to spin out that I'll happily go into it and take whatever the next story is that they want to tell. I guess it's more of a question of how much of the blueprint are you just going to do again for a third time? Like I am surprised like how well it still worked, and the fact that like I'm still going around collecting a bunch of notes and recordings from the quote unquote old world, and like I'm still really interested in all of it, but I don't know if you can pull that off a third time where it's like, oh, but what about this corporation? What were they up to?
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is getting a little formulaic. But it's a tough thing of like creating cohesion without it getting boring. I think I still do like the idea of them being in a new area. I like the opportunities that allows for like cool set piece moments or cool visual moments. Again, the power of sci-fi is in discussions of what's going on now, but like recontextualized. So I like the idea of the environment being the now recontextualized. And I don't know, maybe it's because I like Jack and Daxter and that's what Jak 2 is. Spoilers for Jak 2, right? It's like, I don't know. There's something about it that's amusing or appealing. And I did enjoy this in the LA one as well. I will say the LA vibes weren't as good as the Vegas vibes from the Forbidden West. So that was kind of a bummer. Like, you had the Hollywood sign, but it's like, it's kind of just there. But in its defense, that's how it is in real life. It's just there. It's not, you can't sit on it the way they did in Friends with Benefits. Like, which you're not supposed to do that anyway. That's why they got arrested. Spoilers for Friends with Benefits. Spoiling everything in the spoiler cast. Solid rom-com if you haven't seen it. But, they had like the old theater, but like, and maybe they had a few other things in side quests that I didn't see because I didn't 100% it. But I'm not sure where I'd want them to go. It's tough too because they already did kind of the frozen wilds. Like they kind of want to get somewhere cold. Yeah, I mean they're probably going to outer space. I guess if we're being realistic, that's probably the next frontier. But as far as things I want from the next game, a lot of little nitpicks, like Thwip pointed out as well. Not to disparage your comment for a nitpick, but it's a very specific thing, right? The ammo type thing, which I agree with. I think that anything that could help get me in and out of the menus a little bit more quickly and more effectively would be nice. I actually went over like a massive list of these on the Kind of Funny Games Daily where Horizon 3 was confirmed. So I'll briefly touch on some of those, but I won't spend as much time on it for that reason. But loadouts in that sense. Give me like a melee, I've always wanted to do like a melee, like a trapper, a general build or something like that. And to be able to swap between those, because I think there's so many ways to like buff and debuff armors, and then you have the slots and you have all of this stuff, and that's great, but it's only really good for making like, you kind of have to pick one build, and I feel like you encounter like 3 different scenarios in Horizon. It's either intense combat, distance stuff, or melee stuff. So like, I feel like being able to cater that would be good. I want the dodge adjusted and the knockdown adjusted. When Aloy goes down, she's down and out for the count, which also brings me to, again, kind of skipping through some of these because I'm sure I want to do a write-up eventually to really like think about what my wish list is for this game. But those are just a couple things. But speaking of the knockdown, I want to get into what did you think of that final boss battle? Because I went in with high expectations, and I don't know that it quite lived up. I had a couple gripes here and there, but I'm curious, what did you think of fighting the Metal Devil? Was it everything you dreamed of?
I did really like it in the context of both my wife and I. The final fight with Tilda felt kind of really short and underwhelming. Where it's like you had this very big build up, and there were you were kind of going through areas where the like the stalker type robots were attacking or whatever, and then it's like you had one fight with one of the Zeniths who was just a dude. I think maybe he had a jetpack or something, but that was kind of annoying. And then like this, a little more of an involved like boss fight, but it just kind of it felt underwhelming. And this felt like it was about like 6 boss sequences in a row that kind of just continued to build on top of one another. And so I enjoyed that aspect of it. It definitely felt like, okay, I am in a larger, like, culmination of the story arc. Like sure. This feels like a climax. There like the one section where you were on the beach and you were kind of within like his little playground of tentacle arms or whatever. Like I spent a lot of time just kind of getting knocked down into the sand during that part and like trying to shoot the, the little vent parts that was coming out. But by and large, I enjoyed it. And it all made like, it made more sense. Like sometimes when you get into, boss fights or certain missions, it's just like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just going to the next place that they're telling me to go to. Here it was like, okay, we have to like stop the coolant that is getting into it because otherwise it's going to power up. Okay, we stop that. Now it's moving down the hill to get into the ocean in order to cool off. Like all of this is kind of making thematic sense. And I did like the chase aspect of it where it's like, this is a giant thing that I'm chasing down a hill, towards the ocean. That kind of stuff was cool to me. You like get onto it and you're crawling up it at some point. Like all of that was fun to me. Yeah,
to your point, I do like the build up as well of it, where it fit it's all fighting the machine, but like different aspects of the machine. So you kind of have, like you said, the stealth sequences, but instead of just having like, I mean, there were like random, enemies, like machines around, but it wasn't like just about them. It was also like the arms coming down and kind of like looking at you, and you had to kind of dodge or get out of the way of those, or kind of stealth your way through. Then you like had the thing that invoked like the formal boss battle, which was the like going down to the beach, like hitting the little machine parts. For that part, I actually did all right. Like things were pretty good and also it's funny because they put so much, which rightfully so, they put so much loot around. Yeah. I definitely had those moments where I'm like, you know what? Like, let's just see what's in this chest. Like, got some good stuff in here. Like, again, I don't know if I'm even playing again, so I don't know why I want to fill my pockets with everything they give me. But I really enjoyed hitting the vents on the machine. I didn't have too much trouble like avoiding the arms. The thing I struggled with more was figuring out how close I had to be to actually hit my target, which I do feel like the UI could do a better job at like indicating that overall, especially with some of the really long range bows. I'm like, well, I know the arrow is still going, and they're like, yeah, but you're not close enough. I'm like, all right. I think the scan, I wish they would have let me scan it more traditionally, where you can like mark the parts. I get that some of the parts are like covered, but once you hit that first vent and then you have to hit the second one, it's like scan it. And I'm like, it's the same as the machine I scanned a second ago. So I do wish they like, I think indicated that a little bit clearer. I liked climbing up the thing. It was very, there's a lot of like Shadow of the Colossus, Solar Ash in this, even though Solar Ash is evoking Shadow of the Colossus in its design, but Solar Ash has a lot of that movement and the quickness. Obviously, Aloy isn't as quick as that, but the idea of doing the fight, which I think maybe I would like to see a little bit more of, the idea of fighting on top of a machine and hitting certain parts, I think is really cool. Because it becomes like, again, a grander scale of what we do in the day-to-day. And I liked getting inside the machine and like kind of being in like a cauldron for a second. I didn't really like the two things. I didn't like the before that when you're out and you're just like in a little dome and there's like a cajillion attacks. I could not learn what I need to do there at all. So I was like, I'm just gonna keep just drinking potion because I'm so powerful too. I was like at level like, I don't know, 58. Souped up. I got like a million things. I have those spears that do like a cajillion damage. So after a certain point, I kind of just became a sponge because I couldn't get like, and this thing too, like Aloy is great at, working her weapons and to a degree traversing. I don't think she's that good at like her jump is like very low. So like trying to like jump over things, I'm like, look, I can't do this. So I kind of struggled when I was inside for that reason because it was a lot of waves, and then when it became the waves on the ground, and that's when you can hit the thing, but you also have to dodge the thing. I was like, So I wasn't even trying to dodge those at that point. It's like, okay, this wave is gonna hit me, whatever. I'm gonna drink one of my wife's 10,000 potions, and we're gonna be good. Exactly. Yeah. So it waned a bit in that aspect for me, but I did like the overall conceit of having not just multiple phases, but multiple, I think, mechanics that you kind of go through. And I would like to see them in future games ham that up a little bit more. I would like them to evoke a little bit more, maybe even God of War in it. Obviously, I'm not expecting the gore of God of War, but I think with some of the set pieces, the movements, like just making it a little bit more dynamic and dramatic. I think Horizon's very much known for occasional grandiose animations, whether it's like the iconic, like, tether down, whether it's the, putting the spear into something and having everything come out, like that has always been really fun. And they did a little bit of that in this, but I would like to see a little bit more introduced. But speaking of, difficulty and challenges, Philly Yeatsteak writes in and says, I dropped the difficulty way down back in the main game, and it greatly increased my enjoyment of the game. I beat most fights having to craft more ammo mid-fight, maybe once. I think that's the sweet spot. Anybody else tweak the difficulty setting? So what difficulty do you play on? And, how do you work on navigating whatever challenge that you come into in the Burning Shores? Yeah, I think we played the game on normal, and I think my wife is playing it on very hard now. But it was totally like my wife was much more into upgrading like every weapon and armor she got, and I never would have touched most of that stuff if I had just been playing on by myself. And so
And so we would drop it down when we were farming items and stuff. And there are also like shout out to Gorilla's like options in terms of difficulty and being able to customize all of that stuff, and then throwing in stuff like just auto, it's like auto pickup, or like you can just get whatever, machine parts from a machine after you beat them. You don't have to like specifically target things. Like it's all just going to be stuck inside the carcass that you come up and press one button to get. Like I love having those different kind of options to tweak, like, and being able to tweak like your health versus the machine's healths and all of those kind of things. We messed around with some of that stuff, and I am always a big proponent of like just figure out what difficulty feels good to you and play it on that.
Yeah, pretty much same. I played also on normal. I am curious. I have thought about the New Game Plus ultra hard difficulty, but I'm like, what's this for? You know what I mean? But I'm curious as to how that might translate, especially with that final boss being like, I found the final boss in Forbidden West to be really hard, particularly because I wasn't the right level for it, which I can't lie. I can't take the ownership here. That I was the level that the quest said I should be, maybe higher. Then you pull up and the boss is higher. I feel like, fair or foul, I'm calling foul. You didn't give me all the information I needed. And, this was also during the review period. So I played the whole game like normal. And then for the final boss, I put it to easy because I was like, or a story, like the easiest thing where it's like you sneeze on them and they explode. I was like, look, I'm good. I felt what the fight was like. I got the vibes. I know the attacks. Let's end this thing. So I did that there. I did find Burning Shores to be a little bit more challenging for me than Forbidden West was. It might just be because I was a little bit rusty. And eventually I got like more comfortable. But I think especially too with the introduction of the new machines, it kind of just, you have to kind of reorient how you want to play it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it all like any question of difficulty is always couched in, like what level are you going into all of this? We were maxed out. Like my wife did absolutely everything until she did like the final boss fight of Forbidden West. So it was a total cakewalk. And it's always like I'm a big proponent of don't tie your own personal skill as a gamer into what difficulty level, like tie it to how much fun am I having when you're doing the thing that you're doing, because difficulty or, like your leveling and the leveling of your enemies is going to completely blow any kind of difficulty balancing out of the water if you're not, like completely lined up to what they want you to be. So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel the same way about it. We have Dylan in the chat saying challenge is fun though, but that's kind of the point, right? Like if that's how you feel about it, then you want to make sure that you're challenged. I think difficulty, it cuts both ways. Yeah. Like it should be challenging to a degree for you, assuming that you want the challenge. Some people also just don't, whether it's logistical. Like I have my brother's playing through Forbidden West, I think on story, in part because he's like, I want to get, or Zero Dawn, because he wants to get to Forbidden West. So, different, there's always gonna be a different circumstance and you pick what makes sense for you in that time and in that moment.
Yeah, and that's part of balancing fun too. Like if it's too easy, you're going to realize that you're not having as much fun. Yeah. And that's when you start to turn it up. So
I personally do like that the method your wife invoked, which is it's easier because of the work I did. Like I get a lot of satisfaction out of that. Some people love being able to beat the game on like ultra hard. You take off all your clothes and souls and then you fight them with a stick. I have the strongest stick in the universe and I worked really hard to make the stick and I can one hit people with the stick. That's personally what I love to do in games. And Horizon definitely allows for that, while also like throwing a light wrench in that with the Apex machines, which I've always liked, because it's like, all right, well, no matter how strong I get, like an Apex Slitherfang is still going to be kind of hard because it's just such a powerful machine. But I also was out there maxing out a lot of stuff. I had like very fancy spears, and all my stuff was golden by the end, and I had like my magical cape or whatever that I changed the look of because you can do that now. But talking about weapons, Space Towel writes in and says, "What are your thoughts on the Spectre Gauntlet? It's certainly powerful, but too tech advanced for my taste. I enjoy the more basic, primitive bows, slingshots, javelins. They fit the vibe of the game better. I hope they don't create more of these weapons in the next game."
Yeah, I that's kind of why I like it. Is it does stick out so much compared to everything else. I agree. I don't think I want an entire line of sci-fi zenith weapons going forward. But it's also, I didn't use it a ton because in part because I had this treasure trove of other weapons that legendary weapons that my wife maxed out. I feel like it's pretty balanced in terms of, yes, it's powerful, but it's a different type of attack, and sometimes you're not going to want that type of attack.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do. Like, I am very much more in the camp of, I'm going to trigger like the power shots or whatever they're called, and I'm going to take like 5 really super powerful single shots and do most of my damage that way. But I like it as an option, as kind of an alternative. Like, this is a weird new thing that we haven't been playing with.
Yeah, I'm kind of like lightly the opposite of Space Towel. I really liked the Spectre Gauntlet more in concept than in practice, because much like you, JeffM, like, I didn't really use it very much. I think too, one of the challenges, like I always talk about, like in games like this that have so many different weapons, like, it's the classic, anything can work if you work, right? If you decide that you're going to get really good at the freaking one that's like a boomerang, I'm sure you can do really great stuff with that and be really powerful. I won't, because I'm bad at it and I don't want to get good at it. So I just take that boomerang, I just throw it in the trash, I only used it for that one, like, little camp or whatever to get learn how to use it. And then I was like, I'm not using this again because I was bad at it. And I didn't find it fun. I'm much like you, where I like to use, I mostly just use the bows. Basically, bows, bombs, and the spear. The spear is like my cheat weapon because it's like, in the base game, it was like of, I think, green rarity, but it was a really powerful, like, random spear I got from a side quest that did ridiculous damage. It's really funny because the storyline was, like, it was like two sisters who were making the spear, and they're like, we can't sell this. It's like, and it has this crazy explosion. So I thought it was a really cute in-world introduction to this weapon, but it's stupid OP. So I was like, I'm carrying this all the way through. I took 3 hits of that zenith. I kept walking. It was great. I didn't do the melee stuff. I just tossed it out. And so learning that, like, I put that in my repertoire as well. But I did keep the Spectre Gauntlet in the rotation. I think if I used it more, I would feel its power a little bit more if I got more comfortable. But even without that, it was kind of fun as like somewhat of an auto targeter in a game that is very much about targeting, which I think could be really cool for people that, maybe aren't as good at the targeting or as comfortable with it. It kind of just like makes it a little bit easier. And I think just the aesthetic and the vibe of it, and the idea of taking weaponry that isn't yours is being used against you and then using it against the zeniths. I do think that is where the next game's going. I hate to say it's Space Towel, that's my prediction. I feel like we're going to be having, like, I don't know, a laser pointed at this into the moon or something. Like, I think it's going to get real bonkers with using zenith technology, but hopefully it does still kind of, I think, maintain that holistic feel of what Horizon is. Yeah,
and that is one aspect where I have always struggled with Horizon, where it's really easy to pick up a weapon the first time, shoot it at an enemy a couple times, and be like, that's not as good as what I have already. Yeah. And it's like, you really, to Guerrilla's credit, they don't force you to use any weapons, really after like doing a tutorial for whatever. They're totally fine with you using whatever you want to, but it is a game where you really benefit from going a step further and really experimenting with these different weapons, upgrading them a little, and like using the different kind of abilities that you have with them to like kind of find what makes them powerful and what makes them more fun. But my first impression of it definitely was like, this is okay. I'll stick to what I already already know and am successful with.
Yeah, it looked more cool than it felt. Which what is it? I mentioned that you can unlock a different ammo type from doing a side quest. I did do that actually, and it is cool. It's like a kind of to your point of the one powerful shot. It can like do like one single powerful shot. But again, I didn't really have a lot of time to practice with it. So by the time I was like, this is going to be like everything. And I'm like, wait, do I have to let it go? Do I not? And then, I got knocked down. So I was like, all right, well, in another life, we'll use this. But I did like that as an option. I did like, too, the idea of being able to even upgrade a weapon like that. Because when I looked at, I saw like the trophy list. Because at one point I was like, oh, maybe I'll get all the trophies and like complete the DLC. And one of them was upgrading that weapon. I went to the bench and I'm like, you can't. So then I, assumed like, okay, well, it probably comes through some other story thing or side thing. Bring it back to, combat in terms of the machines. Danielle writes in and says, each and every new machine they introduce is just so awesome. The detail, love, craft that goes into every machine is truly extraordinary. P.S. More machines like the Bile Gut that just spawn enemies. Haha. I really enjoyed how much this changed up the combat. JeffM, what was your read on the new machines? And then did you feel like you wanted more new machines? Was it enough? Like, I could have used one or two extra ones, but you can only put so many without making a new game at that point.
Yeah, that's always tough because my answer is always I want one or two more new ones. Like they could have put in 100 and I'd be like, yeah, but 102 would have been pretty cool. It's always just it's so fun discovering a new machine, and they really don't let you down. I'm glad that Danielle called out the bile gut, especially because that was such a new, like, freaky, weird kind of machine. I think I saw my wife fighting it first before, I actually discovered one by my own. And I was like, what is that giant weird frog thing that's puking all over you? That's another one of the aspects of this series that just drives me crazy, that everyone's just like, oh yeah, whatever, combat's it's like, are you playing, like, all of these enemies are so much more interesting. Yes. Like that, and it's a robot frog that has like these really weird, like unique attacks that it does. It has like everything has their own like weak spots, and sure. but then it's like, but the machine kind of makes sense in its own way. Like it has this armoring that you have to take off. Like it has been built in a way that makes it feel like something that exists in this world that's not just a reskin of some other enemy. And so it's always a treat to find those.
Oh god, you guys aren't talking about robot frogs, are you?
So the Bile Gut, I really like the fact that it is a large machine that also has a lot of agility. I feel like that's not something we've quite seen in terms of the scale of machine. Like you do get that a little bit with like, oh my god, I'm like trying to remember all my machine stuff. Like the I was gonna say the ones that are dog-like, but the ones that have like more of a prowling look to them. I just can't remember the name. There's like a couple different machines that have like a prowling functionality, or, like the gorilla type machines also have like a lot of agility and power to them, but they're not like big and hulking. Yeah. Usually when you have a big hulking machine, the Scorcher or Ravager, thank you, Sai. Yeah, those are exactly the ones I was thinking of, where they can leap at you really quick. They're kind of whip themselves at you. And this has grandiosity and quickness because of the jump, because it's a frog, right? So I do like how it is obviously leaning into some of the expectations you have for the animals that they're evoking, and some are more directly evocative than others. Like the Bile Gut's definitely just a big robot frog, while like some of the other ones, it's like, okay, like it's sort of a mix of a lion and something else, right? Like some of them are more direct analogs to real life animals. But yeah, I think one thing that really stood out to me for the Bile Gut was the ways that in combination with the Ness kind of changed how you need to approach the fight holistically, where you had to take a really big awareness of the battlefield, because if you triggered one of those nests, then everyone kind of knew where you were. And I think one of the first fights you have with the Bile Gut, at least in the main kind of quest line, really does push you towards using the geysers. Like that was something I thought was really cool in this one, where they have these geysers where you can like open up your glider and then kind of like leap up into the air and kind of get, tossed forward and move around quickly. My only beef there was the geysers would like go on and off sometimes, which is maybe how geysers actually work, right? I'm not a geyserologist, but in terms of the game, I struggled with like, it took away like the speed of it where I'm like, okay, I'm going to use the geyser. And they're like, it's not working right now. I was like, well, someone better turn it on.
I'm going to stand on top of it and just wait.
Someone's right. Exactly. So I thought using them wasn't always as smooth as it could have been. Like it wasn't as idiot proof as I would have liked it as someone that was, just standing there, like tapping the button, hoping the thing would open up. But I did like the idea of creating a battlefield and creating enemies that warrant more verticality and movement around the battlefield. Because I think that's something Forbidden West was shooting for, but didn't quite hit. We saw a lot in like those, the PlayStation Directs and things of like, oh, and then you're going to take your grappling hook and you're going to jump and then you're going to glide. And then, and I did a little of that, but not as much as I think they expected or marketed. And I think that's through the design, right? I'll do what I need to do to win. I'm not necessarily doing things just for like the cloud of how cool it looks. So I like the idea of them building around a lot of that. And they did, you saw that a bit with the having the fire gleam that would instant explode when you hit it. Like a lot of areas were just there. Like I feel like this is the first time in Horizon we had just that level of destructibility for the sake of of combat and destruction and not for exploration. Because you see a lot of that in exploration when you're doing like, their like cauldrons or the ruins and things like that. But you don't really see that when, oh no, this can just explode like if you want it to like draw attention or to land on something. So I thought that was like a really cool aspect to it.
Yeah, okay, hey, for sure. Are you guys talking about Horizon?
We're still talking about Horizon.
Look, I know this is going to seem like I'm continuing my anti-Horizon, propaganda, but I need to drive out to a pizza place for New Show Plus, and so we gotta wrap this sucker up.
Well, we were pretty close anyway, so I can get you. Can I get 10 minutes?
No, like literally 2, 1.5, please.
Okay, well, hello, Ben.
Hi.
Can we get some booze in the chat for Ben and leave a comment on YouTube, add us on Twitter.
What am I supposed to do?
Show,
what would you have me do?
At YoZeddy. And just like send a boo if you gotten to the end of this episode.
Right.
Not to say that you didn't like it, but to say that you don't like Ben. Because I think that's something that we all have different angles on the story, the romance, the combat. But I think we can all agree that Ben sucks at this point, at this exact moment. Not all the time, but just right here.
45 seconds are down here.
We had our little safe space, Horizon party, and he came in and he ruined it again.
Yep. This is why we can't have nice things. But last I think we can do like one last shout out to something that we enjoyed or are curious about or whatever. So Jeff, I'm thinking of what one last nod you want to give as I give mine. I really want to just give a quick nod to the Pangea figures. Pretty simple, kind of a way to recontextualize what ruins or a smaller scale of a ruin, so a more like light, low-key puzzle is. I only got 2 of, I think there's 5. But I just thought that was really fun. Like that area in which, bummer, we didn't even talk about the area in general. The theme park area was really cool, had a lot of vibrancy to it. And I like the Pangea figures as a way for me to engage with puzzles while also maybe getting like a little something extra back at that park, which I still don't know what that is yet because, I haven't finished that. Let's see if I'll get back to it. But I really enjoyed finding them and kind of logging them in that big machine. I thought it was just a cool way to push me into some more side puzzle stuff. But what about you? What's something you want to quickly nod to as we close out here?
Oh, I don't know. I was just happy to get more Horizon, and it was a fun new area. It was another great story, and it made me care about digging up more, old world lore again. And it has kind of reinvigorated my excitement, to now wait several more years for the next segment of it. But it's just kind of a testament to how consistently well Guerrilla has done with this series and continues to do with this series. And I can't wait for our next conversation about it to also be ruined by Hansen.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone in chat said Ben's going to hate Horizon even more now for making him late for the pizza party. That's Crowboy in the chat. So obviously we got more content coming your way, with New Show Plus right now. If you're out here in the weeds live, if you're watching later, thank you so much for checking this out. Again, it's a rarity. It's a small percentage. If you you're in a small group if you finish a DLC of any game. So for y'all to finish that and come through to rock with us to have a little bit of that spoiler conversation. That being said, too, since there's not that many of us, we got to stick together. We got to hang out. We got to talk it through. So if you were like, oh my God, I'm dying to talk about this game with somebody, hopefully this conversation provides you with some of that solace. We'll be trying to respond to things as they come up, talking about it more on the main show, the MinMax show. So yeah, check that out. And again, if you like what we do and you have the financial means to do so, please rock with us over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/MinMax, min with 2 N's. We got a whole bunch of different content there to check it out. But let's be real, for the most part, people on there, they just feel like kicking a couple bucks, Don't feel like you got to consume every single piece. If you're here for this, we appreciate you. If you're here for the next thing, we appreciate you too. And as always, we'll see you here next time. Be good, have fun, let's go.
Did you know that you can more than double the amount of podcasts from MinMax every single week by supporting us at the $5 tier on Patreon? You don't have to listen through the browser or anything dumb like that. You'll get access to a private RSS feed if you support us on Patreon. You put it in your favorite podcast app, and then bam, you can listen to our weekly bonus podcast Party Chat, the podcast versions of The Deepest Dives, MinMax interviews, Max spoilers, and you get the MinMax Show podcast a day earlier than everybody else. So please help support independent games media. Head over to patreon.com/MinMax with 2 N's.